Welcome back. It's Friday Coffee Talks, episode number 55. We've got a great one for you today, but before we do, I have a massive, ridiculously big special announcement. Are you ready? Get ready, buckle up. We are adding a podcast format to the show. That's right. We've been on YouTube, we've been on LinkedIn, and we will continue to be, but as of today, with this very episode, we are adding a traditional podcast format to the option list. So we'll be on Spotify, we'll be on Apple, wherever you consume your podcasts. Friday Coffee Talks will be there, ready to join you. I'm very excited about it. We're going to start with the interviews first. We'll get this one and the previous interviews loaded up first. They tend to be longer and kind of lend to that format a little better, but eventually we'll get all the past episodes. We'll simultaneously release all the new episodes on video as well as audio podcasts. So if you want to settle in and listen to the audio version of Friday Coffee Talks, that option will be available for you. We'll still be on LinkedIn. If you want to take the beard in all its video glory, we'll still be there as an option for you, but we're expanding our horizons a little bit and launching as an actual podcast. So I'm very excited. I can't wait. Speaking of excitement, I'm also very excited for today's episode. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with StorMagic CEO, Dan Beer. Well, welcome back to Friday Coffee Talks. Today we have an interview and we are joined by a technology executive, successful businessman, Canadian, and he just so happens to be the guy that signs my paychecks. It is StorMagic CEO, Dan Beer. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks for having me today. I look forward to going down any path you wish, and hopefully I have all your answers for you.
Well, we appreciate you joining the show. Let's jump right in. Kind of, if you wouldn't mind, kind of take me through your background, what led you to end up at StorMagic?
Yeah, sure. So, my background had started out in the tech field in smaller companies, companies that were actually quite smaller, much smaller than StorMagic, in the $1 million range, startups, those types of things. Like most folks, I was cutting my teeth in technology during the late 90s, which means that, the dot-com bubble was just about to happen and everybody was starting a business. And so certainly I was amongst those packs and companies that were doing a lot of that back then. But I left that probably not far after the dot-com bubble burst, if you will, and ended up getting into companies that were a little larger and did most of my formative years, Connor, in those kind of larger companies. So Cognos was one of them, and it was about $100 million when I joined, and we grew it to about 1.3 billion, and so that was a good ride, but a bigger company. And then we sold that to IBM, and here I thought I was going to go to a smaller company again after Cognos, but the $1.3 billion company became I think at the time it was $120 billion IBM. So, did another 10 years there and got to see I guess the big leagues of software, where you're actually playing multinational, much bigger expanse of budget and so forth. But, after between the two of them, geez, I'm going to say, 15 years or so, it was time to take that expertise and come back to where I started, which was really smaller companies that are more nimble, a little bit more intimate and personal, and have a lot of ability to grow from where they are, as opposed to the big steam trains that are hard to turn. And so, that brings me back to StorMagic, which is in a perfect size for that breakout.
Okay, so kind of take me through, if you don't mind, when you were making that jump, having discussions with the StorMagic board and kind of leaning into that decision to come over here. What are some of the things that jumped out at you about our company that made you decide you wanted to come over and join us?
Yeah, well, StorMagic has so many great assets going for it. And, there's a lot of things I've tried in other startups, and clearly you learn over the years and what works and what doesn't, right? And startups and smaller companies have different ingredients that sometimes are in place or not in place. And StorMagic happened to have a lot that were already in place, which means there was a little bit less soil to hoe, if you will, for us to be successful. When I looked at StorMagic, I saw a market space we sold into that was extremely large, which is always a good sign. You want to have market to play in. You don't want to be selling, Ice Cube to Inuits type thing, because everyone's got one, right? It had a great CAGR. We're growing at 38% in our market, which means you don't necessarily just need to replace a big gorilla in the market, but you can actually take on market share just by what the growth alone is, frankly. The products were actually working. I've taken over many companies where products were actually not working, and job number one was to get the products off the cutting room floor and make sure you could actually get an install and make sure that the things actually didn't corrupt the customer's entire systems and, and have it be an engineering problem. And we clearly don't have that. Our products are both working and differentiated, meaning they have a place in the market. You can clearly say where they fit, where they don't fit, and what makes them unique. And then finally, I would say we have real live marquee customers that have put their trust in us, which is a great asset for a company to have to start. And so, when you evaluate where we're starting from, it was a good opportunity to pick up with some ingredients in the cake already mixed, and then just continue on to bake the whole cake.
So you're a frosting, I guess.
I think of myself as sweet. No one else does, but here you go. You gotta have your own dreams, right, Connor?
That works. So I'm curious then, as somebody who's been a C-level at multiple companies then, how do you feel about stepping into a company that is somewhat already established with their own flavor in the marketplace, their own reputation, their own culture? How is that different from like a founder's mentality to step in and lead a company that has been established already?
Yeah, I think it's quite different than a founder's mentality. I mean, founders are interesting folks, and they certainly are the bread and butter of getting companies started. Without founders, clearly you wouldn't have all the tech companies that end up blossoming, right? But founders often, depending, it's not always the case, but many of the founders I've found, they are in and are still in the only company that they've ever founded. Mm-hmm. And, they're typically working with smaller teams. They haven't actually had either global or international experience or really looked at what's worked and what hasn't in other places. Now, that's not true of all entrepreneurs. You can find those entrepreneurs that have, success or failure, number one, number two, number three, number four, number five, and then finally they hit it, right? But I think that's probably not always the case when you see startups that are like us. And, I think that the interesting thing when you come in is that there's an entrenched culture, there's an entrenched way the business operates, and you want to look at that and find the secret sauce about what truly makes the business good and unique. But you frankly have also an exercise in growing the company beyond where it is and having people stretch their muscles that they might not be used to because they're used to operating in a particular way, often for many years, that was driven more around the personality of the founder than perhaps a general organization. And so I think that's really the job of an incomer, is to make sure that you're not throwing everything out and being hyper aggressive and saying everything is awful, we got to start over, and really just finding where can you be additive instead of reductive.
Okay. Let's change gears for 1 second. Kind of interject a little thing. So on some of our team calls, we do what's called a question of the week. We kind of dish out a question unrelated to numbers or business or strategy or anything like that. And one of the ones we've used in the past, I'm going to give to you. So what is one of your passions that you have yet to act on?
One of the passions that I get to act on?
No, that you have yet to act on. You haven't done it yet.
Oh, that I have yet to act on. Well, my passion that I would have all my life, Connor, I tried to act on and I wasn't successful. How about I leave you with that one?
That works.
My entire life, I've been a competitive hockey player and played here in Canada, where I'm from, and played semi-pro and went to the pro draft. And, that was and is my passion. I still play 3 times a week. However, my passion had always been, wouldn't it be something to play pro? Sure. Right. And play in those ranks. And so, I put that work in the early days, more so in my career in life too. And I got this close. And, I went to the NHL draft, and folks said I was going to be drafted, and they told me the round they thought it was going to be. And wow. I left that place disappointed. So my passion never got realized to actually play pro. However, it still remains my passion to be in hockey. So I guess I could say I'm still realizing it, because I'm still at it, still struggling along, creaky bones and all. But I continue to play my passion, even though that sunset on the zenith, which would have been to fully play pro.
I guess that's a good message of even if you don't quite get to where you want to get to, you can still participate and still kind of feed that passion, even if you maybe didn't achieve all the goals that you thought you would.
Yeah, that's my view. I mean, lots of folks actually give it up. They think, okay, I haven't done it, to hell with it. I'm just throw that in and go in another direction, but I
Right.
think if you really love something, you might not get to where you want to be. And frankly, I think you can say that corporately, does everybody wants to be $1 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion as a company, but it doesn't mean that if you don't, you achieve 10, 15 million, 20 million, 100 million, whatever the goal is, you have to step back and say, we've progressed. It may not be the NHL, but we've progressed, right? And that's an accomplishment in its own right.
Sure. Yeah. And what position do you play?
I was defense back then, and now I'm rover.
Okay.
Which doesn't really exist, which means I go wherever the hell I feel like it. Because it's not really for anything of serious merit, right?
It's just on the ice.
On the ice, yeah. Follow the puck.
I think what we need to do is next year, as we start into our next financial year, you should grow a playoff beard for our fiscal year goals.
Well, I would, but you intimidate the hell out of me, and now I can't.
I'm just trying to get some more people on my team.
No way in hell I can freaking compete with that. So, I had thought about it. Put me right in the corner, my friend.
All right. So I want to kind of explore some of your leadership mindset. So as you're stepping into a company, you're around 6 months in on the position with StorMagic. So over these last few months, what are some of the most important things that you've focused on that you as a leader want to have the most impact on?
Yeah, well, I would say there's a couple things as a leader that are always on the forefront of your mind. And for me, the very first one is people. In a business like ours, especially in software, unlike some other businesses, like manufacturing, right, where you've got goods and you've got things you're building and you've got products that are perhaps requiring raw materials. People in our business are the raw materials, right? That's really what we're working with. And so I've always believed that if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're probably in the wrong room because you need to surround yourself by folks that are clearly in their area of expertise, as smart as you can get. And so for me, it's about assembling the right team at all layers, making sure that we have the growth of expertise and that those people have experience growing their particular areas. And so people is always at the forefront. And, we're adding roles, as you see. We added a new CFO, we added a VP of HR, we got a new CTO coming on board confidentially, but I guess it's not very confident. They start on Wednesday. So, making sure that we got the right team on board is number one. And I think, the focus after that in leadership, when you're surrounded by the right team is, and I'm sure you've heard it said before, Connor, without a roadmap, any road will get you where you're going. And, there's lots of opportunity to say, I'm going to go left, right, center, wherever you decide to go. But a company needs to be focused. It needs to understand what it can do in what time frame and actually make sure that shared commonality of vision is clear across the company. And, that's the next focus I've had, is trying to make sure that we evaluate all the opportunities we have, make sure we're picking the ones we know we're going to go after. And that goes by, product, it goes by countries, it goes by route to market, it goes by products we're building. All of those things come together and say, are we really clearly aligned and know what we're doing? And so I think we're getting there. FY23 coming will probably be the clearest picture that the company has ever seen on how we're going to do that. And,
right.
The way we execute is important to get us to where we're going on our vision.
Okay. So kind of with the changing tides of the world as it is right now, obviously in-person interactions aren't going anywhere, but for our industry, especially, how do you think that the long-term adoption of virtual meetings is going to impact us? And then specifically, how will that impact the executive and board level versus the perspective of somebody like me in sales?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting conversation because for me personally, ever since, I'm going to say, at least in technology, because again, every field could be different, right? But in tech companies and software, I think the software industry has been remote in a lot of companies for a while. Mm-hmm. Now it was executed a little differently. It wasn't always everybody in their own house. Think of it more as disparated groupings of excellence. I'll give you an example. When I had my software division at IBM, I had a lab in Romania. I had a lab in North Carolina. I had a lab in Ottawa, Canada. Now not everybody came into those offices. There were subsets of the development team all over the darn place, as an example, and some people work from home out of those places. Some people went in. So there's always been the challenge of how do you get diverse locations, diverse people, diverse working systems to play into one single unity, right? It's certainly gotten harder with COVID, where it's now gone the extreme, where people are literally, there is no hub, they're going to their homes. And I think certainly management teams, boards, sales teams, they've all struggled. I would imagine there's some places that are affected a little less, and I think sales, Connor, is probably one of them. If you think about how an engineering team works versus, say, a sales team, you very often have sales teams in theater, right? Closest to the region as you can get them, and visiting customers, visiting partners. And so it's often they will be, work from home or work remote from where they are. But no matter whether it's an engineering team, whether it's an executive team, or whether it's a sales team, I think the key in any working relationship in teams is you have to establish trust. And you have to find ways to make sure that people get to know people in a way that are beyond cursory. Yeah, I saw that guy on a Zoom, and other than that, I have no idea what he's about, or can I trust him, or those kinds of things, right? And I think that comes to either making sure you're taking the time and the budget to get face-to-face events, making sure there's regular cadence where people come together or get to know each other, make sure that they make those connections. And then when they go away and they work remote, whether it's in hubs or literally out of their home, they take those connections with them. So it's easier to sit on the phone and talk to someone you've had a couple beer with than it is, I've never ever met this person and I wonder what I should really say, right? You've kind of broken the ice. Mm-hmm. And so I think that regular in-person cadence is absolutely required. It just, the frequency of it extends. It's not every day like an office. You're not going in and seeing people, but there has to be a cadence of getting those connections together and making sure that the personal side of the relationship continues to get reinforced. And so we're going to do that StorMagic. We're going to do that at all levels. I mean, the board meets at least once a year just to make sure we're seeing people actually in the flesh, and then everything else goes remote after that. I'm trying to get the ELT together once a quarter in person. We're going to do it again this quarter. We're going to do it in January, but Omicron put some dampening on that, but we're going to do it again before the beginning of March. And then once a quarter, get those face to face, and then the remote becomes more effective because the relationships are established.
Right. I think it's really interesting, the shift of, especially office workers. I haven't been one of those in a long time, but it was always kind of a negative sentiment about going into the office. You have the commute and the, getting dressed and putting a tie on every day. And it was always kind of like a downer to be in the office. And now I feel like people are really kind of clamoring for that to a degree, especially if, it really hit them during lockdown about they liked being around people, and now that's limited. It's funny to me to see that shift happen in people where they're really wanting to get back to some more face-to-face stuff.
Yeah, well, remote working, as you say, is not for everybody. There's lots of folks that require that interconnection with people, and that feeling of belonging, and that feeling of shared unity again. And there's nothing like going into the same place every day and actually interacting and having conversations to make you feel part of something, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's harder when you're sitting off in some remote city in your house to sometimes feel as connected as one might. And so in absence of being able to have offices in every city, we have to do as much as we can to at least bring the face-to-face together, because it's impossible to function 100% remote and never meet ever.
Right. Though it's real easy to see these walls start closing in on you.
Yeah, people end up in their own little silo, and then they don't really understand what all the rest of the little silos are doing, and frankly, don't perhaps have the relationship among the silos to care.
Sure.
So I think getting together and again, having some good times as well as work helps establish that trust, those relationships, and just a better dialogue.
Absolutely. So let's step back just a little bit then. So from kind of the specifics of virtual versus in person, let's talk about leadership kind of as a broader umbrella. So how do you think the role of a leader is changing? And do you think the qualities of a great leader are going to change and evolve, or is great leadership a timeless thing that's going to endure?
Yeah, I think that people confuse leadership and management, frankly. And I think that great leadership has always existed and will endure, and has qualities that I think are universal, whether you're remote, whether you're not remote. I think where people confuse it is in how management occurs. And I think that in my mind, COVID requires a dramatic change in management that the world is not ready for, hasn't been ready for, and I would say still isn't ready for. So, if we unpack those a little bit, Connor, you think about leadership, which is, again, I think, having a vision of where you want to go, being able to clearly articulate that vision, and being able to, in some ways, inspire people that it's something that you want to be on board with, is in my view fairly universal. And you can do that in a remote setting, you can do that over TV, you can do that over rallies, you can do that, there's lots of ways to get your message out as a leader and a visionary, and there's different levels, right? You think about, what do our politicians do, what do global leaders do, they're certainly not going into an office every day, right? A global leader, but they still have the way to have a clear, concise vision, get people on board with that vision and belief system, if you will, and inspire them to want to come, right? And so I think that leadership characteristic is fairly timeless, but management is clearly changing. I think that, and again, I think tech is a little bit different because there's been more remote than, say, other verticals and things. But if you think about the way people often managed in the past, it was a bit, and maybe this is a bit too direct to say, but it was a bit of lazy management. It was management by counting hours. I'm paying you, Connor, to be here at 8 and leave at 5, right? So are you in your chair? Great. Check. Did you leave at 5? Check. Did you have an hour for lunch? Check. Okay. Then I'm managing you, right? Because you're in your chair at the right times, right? You clearly can't manage like that when you're remote, right? Because we don't know where you are, or when you're waking up, or when you're logging on, and when you're not. And so you clearly got to gear yourself to being less activity based and more outcome based, and making sure that your outcomes you're setting for people are extremely clear with a timeline to get to them, and empowering them to get to those outcomes without wondering where they are or how many hours they're working. So you're starting to now pay and manage for outcomes and knowledge, as opposed to time. Right. And whether we like to think it or not, a lot of economies and companies have been measured around time. I'm paying you for your time. The whole concept, what's your hourly wage? What's your, what's the minimum wage per hour? But it doesn't really deploy itself well when you're thinking about being in a remote environment where you're not clocking FaceTime.
Right. I completely agree. I think the other important caveat about leadership is that I think a lot of people conflate that with, a title or a management level, something like that, where, I think especially leadership, unrelated to management, is all about the attitude and the culture and the approach that you take to things, not necessarily, who's responsible for who and who leads what team on paper, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think leadership is about having an attractant and an inspiration, as opposed to a position title. And you can see that at all levels of an organization. I've led support organizations where you can look across the support organization, which is not always, say, the premier organization in a company, but there's individuals in that particular organization where you can say, man, everybody flocks to them. For whatever reason, they have an attractant, that they're articulate, they know how to articulate what they believe in, and people, buy into their beliefs and values, and they're willing to follow. And I think, to me, that attractant and willingness to have folks follow along beside you are key ingredients of leadership, and they can manifest themselves all over the place.
Absolutely. So as our CEO and the leader of a company, then let's say StorMagic 10, 15, years way down the road, what are some of the things that you as our leader want to be remembered for? What's the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, I think big word, legacy. I'm feeling old, Connor. I feel like I'm going to die and I'm a painter, and then finally my works will be worth money. I don't know. I would say it's a legacy, but when I think about companies, I think about the people again, right? It's not about how many more sales did we achieve? Did we get another dollar in revenue? Of course, that drives the company. Don't get me wrong. It's important because you need to feed mouths, you need to pay the bills, you need to, do good things economically, right? But at the end of the day, as I said, people are the asset of a company. And I think the things I look to are, did you leave the relationships and make relationships that made you and those around you better than before you went? And, did you have an impact on people, and did they have an impact on you? And to me, that's as an important part of anything, and making sure when you come and go to companies, you can look back and say that impact was both positive to you and those around you. And because frankly, other than a very few companies in the world, most companies don't make something profound, if that makes sense. So you certainly, if you're the first one to ever develop a rocket to go to the moon, that's quite the legacy. You put people on the moon. But frankly, most companies aren't like that. Procter and Gamble sells toothpaste, right? But you still want to have an impact on that company, and I think, to me, that is always going to be the people.
I agree to a degree, but I also think that as a smaller company that competes with some of these folks who have hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing budget and all that kind of stuff, significantly more market revenue than us, we, just speaking personally about StorMagic, we may not be profound in a global sense, but I feel like with the customers that we interact with and the partners we interact with, we can make a profound impact on them, even where we are.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think, to me, that's part of the people aspect, I guess, in wrapping it up, right? Whether it's your staff around you, whether it's your customers you're dealing with, you're impacting people on a real lively basis. And sometimes that is product, sometimes that's just service.
Right.
I mean, that's not, someone's in a bind in our world, StorMagic, a Mark Christie helps them out at midnight on a UK GMT, right?
Which he often does.
Which he often does. So, that person in that company goes away with a little bit of a stronger tie to Mark, to, the working relations, and it can be, to me, as simple as that, or it can be product related for sure. Sure, we can transform through products and give people things that will make their lives easier. But to me, the impact is, I made their lives easier.
Right.
Not they bought a product, right? It's
right.
Like, what
right.
impact did I have on that person? That person now has a better day because they go to work and they don't have to worry about a bunch of crap that they once worried about. We simplify it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore that to me is the tie. And so I always come back to, it's about the impact on the people and the relationships, and, more so than the material stuff, like a piece of software, but clearly you get there through a
right.
piece of hardware, a piece of software or something. Right. But it's about, what did it do? What did it do? And what did it do to the people around you?
Makes sense. Makes total sense. All right. So Dan, our traditional last question, the show is called Friday Coffee Talks. You have been at a long hockey practice. You're headed home. On the way home, you decide you're thirsty. Swing into a coffee shop. What is the go-to coffee order for you?
Jamaican rum and Coke.
Oh,
I guess they don't sell that at the coffee shop. Here's the honest answer. But if it has to be coffee, it would probably be, believe it or not, Tim Hortons.
Okay.
Tim Hortons, dark roast coffee. Lots of cream, because their cream is like candy. I don't know why. I think they put MSGs or crack cocaine in the cream. I'm not sure. Something to addict you.
Either one is good.
Either one is good. It does the trick. Tastes good and keeps you coming back. But that would be the coffee order.
I love that answer. That's the best, most stereotypical answer you could have given. It's perfect. Oh gosh. Well, Dan, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate the chat.
Yeah, happy to, Connor. It's a pleasure, and we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us. This has been Friday Coffee Talks, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye for now.